Hello again, Steve here. I've been in a bit of a debate, I would call it, online to do with a video that I posted. And it's a grand debate in a way because it's rolling on, and I have to say I'm not that used to this sort of thing, though it is interesting because it gets me to consider why it is that I put forth certain questions, why it is that I put forth certain foundational understandings, this sort of thing. And the debate is around the idea that one guy seems to be putting forth the idea, just paraphrasing here once again, that statutes or man-made rules and regulations apply to everyone, or certain ones do, what he might say, what we might call government, as we know it, government. So if the government says so, in other words, through their official documents they call acts or statutes, in a particular equally made up geographical boundary, anybody who is in there is subject to, or those acts or the acts or statutes, those rules apply to them. So that in itself, that is an assertion, right? That is a claim, making the claim. So, and to me it's an extraordinary claim, because, if that one individual didn't agree to it and they apply, that claim is very extraordinary, and therefore it needs extraordinary proof. And I have yet to see I've seen arguments for it, but they are what I would say fallacious arguments. Most of them, I would say, revolve around what I would call a logical fallacy of circular reasoning. Along the lines of, everyone is required, I'm paraphrasing once again here, but everyone is required to follow the statutes that the people have approved of through the representatives, right? Because government is supposed to be representative of the people. And if government does something, then that's supposed to mean the people approved of it, because they voted for the government. So, everyone is required to obey the statutes that the people approved of, because the people say so. Along that line. Now that is a form of circular reasoning, I would say. It's along the lines of how certain fundamentalist Christians will say, the Bible is true because the Bible is the Word of God and God said so. So it's using the document itself to prove that it's true. Or, if you ever had the misfortune to talk to a lawyer and ask them, where does this jurisdiction come from for your statute law, they'll point to, a law says so. So in other words, this group of laws that people have created is true and it applies because this bundle of laws says so. It's kind of like the theory of the perpetual motion machine, that it basically drives itself. That is a logical fallacy, as far as I understand it, and a logical fallacy automatically means that it's not true. So, to try to put forth such an argument means, well, it falls flat because it's not substantiated. First of all, it's an extraordinary claim, to claim that somebody who has not agreed to a bunch of rules people made up is subject to them. That's an extraordinary claim. And just because they're forced to obey them doesn't mean that they're subject to those laws. I mean, inherently, right? Because that would be another claim. That would be another claim to say that The reason they were forced to do something is because of the statute. But you can't say that for sure. All you know is that they were forced to do it. You don't know why. And even if people say so, well, people lie all the time. So it's basically, my point is it's a circular logic. That is what I'm seeing as a form of. And the second thing is that if somebody actually believes that sort of stuff, if somebody actually believes or supports the notion that rules and regulations that a bunch of people made up apply to people who have not agreed to it, they think that's okay, then they are behaving in a way that negates any ethical considerations. And of course, or their ethical consideration is that violence is okay. Because after all, because what they're saying is there is a dictatorship, right? Because it doesn't matter how many people rule over other people. It's a dictator if somebody comes along somewhere and is somehow automatically supposed to bow down to these rules that they didn't agree to. If there was one dictator, say Saddam Hussein or something, that makes up stuff and everybody's got to do it, we call it a dictatorship. If there was a posse of 10 people, whatever, we'd probably still call it a dictatorship. If there's 29.999 whatever million people who all get together and make up some rules, and one individual on the side who hasn't, from his perspective, if he's got to follow their rules, he's living under a dictatorship. So it doesn't matter what the relationship is, it's just a to and fro, right? It's a dictated and the one who's having to follow them. So if that's okay, then the ethical consideration is that violence is virtuous. If it's not okay, then the conversation has to go in a different direction, which is basically that this is not acceptable. And of course that leads into a whole discussion as to how else to do it, but that isn't the point here in terms of a moral consideration. Probably wasn't for the abolitionists of slavery, it probably wasn't a debate for them as to who the hell's going to pick the cotton, right? Their whole point was, this is an ethical, moral question. Is it okay to own other people, other human beings? I mean, the argument as to who's going to do it is another point, right? And I get it. People who say, well, what are we going to do if everybody doesn't follow these acts and statutes? That's not my point. That's not my point at all. We're ingenious individuals, human beings. We'll probably figure it out. The question is, the ethical question is it okay for one or a group of people, whatever, to foist their rules and regulations on people who have not agreed to them? Simple question. And if it's not, then we have to stop. Or we have to admit it, that it's wrong, right? The other thing that's in this whole debate that probably gets missed sometimes, I know I miss it sometimes, and I missed it just rolling through right here because I was going to say it earlier, is this concept of this tendency to create abstractions and pretend that they're real. For example, a comment like, the people approved of something. What the hell does that actually mean? What is the people? It's like saying God said so. What the hell is God? Can anybody actually agree to what that is? Can anybody actually agree to what the people is? Can you talk to the people? Can you point over there, there's the people? I have never been able to. I can point out individual men, individual women, I can talk to them, but I can't talk to the people. See, it's word trickery. That we as human beings get to think, oh, that must mean all those men and women. Why not say it then? I don't know. I think it's trickery, and that's why it's not said. I think this stuff is very cleverly crafted. so that we actually think it means something. And as a result, as the detractors do make the point, people fall prey to it, and they, in a way, agree to it. Individual human beings, in a way, agree to it. When I say people, I don't mean the people. That's a term that's used. The people? That's a singular entity. When we say people, in common vernacular, that means, a bunch of men and women over there. But the people? What the hell is the people? Have agreed to something. Can the people actually agree? Oh, people, individuals or people, for that matter, groups of human beings, or many human beings, will say things like, oh, well, we voted. Once again, who's we? I didn't vote. So you're not talking to me. Oh, the majority. What's the majority? All these constructs of the majority, the people, the nation, the country, the government. What the hell are these things? They're all just made up stuff. Can't talk to them. They are, people stand in their stead. Individual men and women stand in their stead and claim to be, I'm the people. I represent, the politicians say, I represent the people. Okay, now show us the people. Nobody thinks to ask those kind of questions, right? So that's a fallacy. It's just I don't know if you call that a red herring, what it is. It just flattens the point. You're pointing to something, you're trying to argue, and you're filling in the argument with a non-existent entity, an entity you can't prove. So the extraordinary claim falls extremely flat, makes a swan song of a dive onto its face, proverbially, of course. So yeah, I think that in such an argument, I've learned a few things. I've learned to witness circular argument in a way. I've learned to do my best to pick out words that really are not defined and are not really definable. Who can define God, what God is? Who can define what the people is? You can define what people are, but what the people is? The people is? People is supposed to be plural for a bunch of human beings, right? So, do we say a bunch of human beings is standing over there? No, they are, right? So people are is accurate, but the people is? And the people? It's just one of those constructs. So, circular argument, use of words that don't really have any meaning, or at least they need to be defined as such. And the negation of the ethical consideration. Is this right or wrong? What is the ethical consideration? I would point out too that there's other points in there that are, there seems to be a whole bunch of stuff dumped in each post cases. There's ethic, there's logic, there's choice. All of these things get mixed up and they have to be chiseled down. I think the basic chisel down comes especially in reference to this sort of thing. It becomes most importantly an ethical question, which is that, is it okay to initiate violence upon somebody who's peaceful? If somebody over here, one individual, has never agreed to a bunch of rules that a bunch of people have created, if he hasn't, is it okay to impose those rules upon him? Because if you do, you're having to impose your violence on somebody. And if that's okay, then as far as I can see, you're making the statement, the overt statement really, that imposing violence on somebody else is moral and virtuous. To me, that's not so. But we can differ on a lot of things, right? I think this is an important one, absolutely critical one, is the ethical consideration. Let's think about that. And we'll talk again soon. Bye-bye for now.